This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Released on Sunday, July 19th, 2015.
This Agile Life, episode 90.
Wow.
The software industry transforms more and more every day.
Agile methods are quickly replacing traditional ones.
The question is, are you agile enough? This podcast is devoted to agile and lean software development.
Time to welcome your agile coaches on
This Agile Life.
Yes, it is the time where we shall come together and we shall discuss the one and only annual, this time the 9th annual, State of Agile Survey, as has been prepared by version 1. And so, of course, my name is Jason Tice. Welcome to This Agile Life, a very special annual edition that we do every year. And joining me, I've got two other co-hosts tonight who have so graciously volunteered to conduct a comprehensive analysis of version 1's data, and we're going to talk about it tonight and share kind of some things that we observed about the data and what we think about it. So we have Lee McCauley here tonight. Lee, what's going on?
Not much, Jason. How are you? I'm glad to hear that we are ready to take this on once again, especially our yearly annual thing. Well, making sure we do it annually, yearly.
Well, and I am so happy to report in advance that, you know what? And I'm just, spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, the state of our Agile Union is strong because the number one Agile tool has yet to be dethroned. The number one Agile tool out there in the community is Microsoft Excel. Yes, consistency. And also joining us tonight for this special edition of This Agile Life, we have one of our newer hosts who actually has never been part of this before. So, Natalie, tell us why you're so excited to be here this evening.
Oh, I have been poring over this documentation all day long, and I can't tell you how excited I am to finally find out what the state of the Agile world is through V1. They have truly opened my eyes. Truly opened my eyes. So thank you so much for inviting me to this tradition that I am so excited to be part of.
Well, and so with that, a little, as Natalie is new, a little bit about the tradition for those of you that might be a more recent adopter of This Agile Life. Believe it or not, if you haven't ever listened to an old episode of This Agile Life, we actually used to do the news. And lots of funny backstage stories about the news. As you can imagine, some people were not a fan of it. Some people loved it. But in one of our early episodes, this survey came out, and I remember John talked about it, and we kind of got stuck on it. And next thing you know, we're all diving into the data, and we're kind of seeing like this doesn't make sense, and kind of what's going on here. And obviously, since version 1 does publish this survey every year, and they actually, to their credit, they invest some money to get the data. If you have to be going to Agile 2015, I'm pretty sure. Although full disclosure, none of us work for version 1 here, so we are independent. We pride ourselves at This Agile Life about that. But they'll probably be out. They typically are, having a giveaway. So if you want to donate 5 minutes of your time, take the survey at the conference, they'll enter you in a drawing to win a prize. So they get their data and they hire a firm to go over it and they present this report, and it's interesting to talk about. So we've kind of started doing. We've all of us have reviewed the survey here tonight, and we thought we would just kind of leaf through it and see what jumps out at us. So that's kind of the history of this. I know Nate Mackey always has had some interesting things to say, and he unfortunately couldn't join us. So
one of the things I'd like to jump in with to start off is nowhere does it says what this sort of the sampling is. Is this
wrong?
Really?
Well, they kind of tried to do that.
Where?
Well, so on page 4, they have respondent demographics, but that's where I'm going to go off the back because this was two things. Full disclosure, I made the same comment last year and actually the year before that about the survey where I see an opportunity missed here. And then secondly, we failed as a podcast because I know I said last year when we talked about the survey that we should do our own independent survey administered by This Agile Life, and here it is a full year later. Have we done that? No, so we failed. But if you look on page 4, it says size of organization. And it says 53% of all respondents said that they had more than 1,000 people in their software organization. Okay, that's
actually, I think I know where you're going with this, Jason.
Yeah,
please let me have this one.
Oh, you okay?
Oh,
as our resident doctorate in
please
you're an AI, but you get all that actuary stuff, right, Lee? I'm a lowly MBA, so I'm sorry. So okay, so Lee, let's talk about how we should define our demographics here.
At some point, I want to finish what I was going to say.
I'm just being rude tonight. I'm sorry. We're all fired up about this one.
Well, so I just wanted to point out that as I think where Jason was going with this is 53% are more than 1,000 people, 35% more than 5,000 people, 20% more than 20,000 people in their organization. That leaves a whopping 2% for any organization that was a respondent to this thing that was below 1,000 people.
No. That's actually not where I was going, Lee. Where I was going is so I'll close this thread, then we'll go back to Natalie. Is 53% of all respondents had more than 1,000 people in their software organization. Okay, then 35% of the people had more than 5,000 people in their entire organization. And then there's one that says 20% of all people had 20
work in very large organizations.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is we're comparing two different samples there. One is the entire organization size, and then the other is the software organization, which are different things. And what I've said all along, again, the opportunity for whatever the firm is they hired to do this for them, is I want to see the complex correlation. So I want to see out of those 53% of the people that have 1,000 people in their software organization, what percentage of those people are in an organization that has more than 20,000 people in it? Make sense? But you can't see that from this data. So the potential impact of this data is reduced because they haven't published that type of a complex correlation. So, Natalie, bring us back to reality here. What got us in this foxhole?
So when I looked at that size of the organization on page 4, I started to think math is like really hard because that adds up to 108%. We are not comparing the same thing to another.
Yeah, thank you. You're saying the same thing I am. So
yeah, absolutely. But nowhere in here, back to my other point, is that who are the people that we're actually surveying? I have a strong suspicion that they're surveying people that they are trying to get to buy their product. So obviously they already have an interest in an agile transformation, or they're already agile. So the numbers are so damn skewed to start with.
Well, and here's the one I'd love to see, because I know that, like, again, at the Agile conference every year, like the past 2 or 3 years, like either you've been able to complete the survey in their booth in the expo hall, or they've had like kiosks set up around the conference center where you could. So I think the response is maybe skewed because only like 3,000 people did the survey, I think. So I mean, it's a pretty small sample size that I think the data is skewed because a large number of those responses are probably collected at the annual Agile Alliance conference.
After they've had a few drinks.
Yeah, or I don't know. So, but here's something else related to size, though, that I thought was, it was right off the back. Because in the executive summary, it says that Agile development, once a predominantly team-based practice, is grabbing the attention of the business. Stop. That statement alone tells me we have a problem. Because aren't we talking about, like, going back to the manifesto, the business should work with the development team on a daily basis, yes?
Of course.
So
yes.
If we are here in the 9th year of the State of Agile survey, 14 years after the manifesto was signed at Snowbird, and we're simply now saying that we're grabbing the attention of the business, what gives? And there was silence. Okay,
the silence is deafening. Yeah.
Okay,
not a lot for what they. I think that what that shows is that it's a meaningless statistic.
Yeah.
It's not tracking anything. It's not showing anything. It's just like they've thrown out some questions that are not actually getting to a particular goal, and throwing them out there like they actually mean something, and they don't.
Yeah, well, the other one is it's funny. This year's State of Agile survey found that more companies and bigger companies are scaling and embracing Agile as part of the larger vision to deliver software faster, easier, and smarter. I guess scaling is a trend. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit because there's a whole page about scaling. But who cares? I mean, again, you're delivering. Who cares if you're in a big organization or a small organization? You're delivering. I mean,
well, there was another statistic around like the percentage of teams that were running in an agile way. Like they were surveying companies that are huge, and they've got 2 teams they're agile, and they're responding in a way that is representative of a 20,000 company, 20,000 employee company, and they may have 5 people that are actually executing an agile practice.
Well, that was my question too. And I think we talked about this last year because on page 6. So kudos to Natalie for pulling us forward. For those that are interested, this survey is 16 pages, so we're on page 6. Hopefully, we'll make it through tonight without too much time. But there's a big chart I'm holding up here. I printed it out. I'm old school. It says 94% of all organizations are practicing Agile.
What? Lies and untruths.
No. How do you assess that? What does that mean? Is my question.
Well, that goes back to my whole question about who are they surveying? Because they are certainly leads, people that they know that even have an interest in this. It can't be a representation of all companies doing software development. It's just impossible.
It's someone that has also been coming to the conferences, right? Well, of course, those people are going to be people that are already interested in Agile in the first place.
Well, conference
for the most part.
Or to be fair, V1 does promote this through channels other than the conference. I know in the past we've talked about, I believe, well, this is why I know because I've received it and being a V1 user at one point in my past, that they do kind of solicit it to users and stuff. So you could say the sample, again, is probably somewhat skewed, especially when you get to some of the data at the very end of the survey. But let me ask this question for you guys. So let's go back to that hypothetical goal we set for ourselves last year that we failed miserably because we dropped the ball on it. If we were to provide some guidance to people to say, how would you assess if an organization is practicing Agile? What criteria would we recommend?
That's really tough.
I mean, I'm just saying, this is where people start, and again, these evil things are out there too. We've talked about it. Let's break out our Agile maturity model. Woo!
That's so subjective, though.
Well, yeah, or guess what? Because later on they talk about practices. So I have one team somewhere in my organization that's having a stand-up meeting. Does that mean I'm Agile?
Well, now we're getting into the bad habit of equating Agile with certain practices.
Well, yeah, that's where so I think that
it's hard to tally numbers when Agile is more of a mindset and than it is a certain number of practices.
Well, and I guess as we all have all lived this, and to be fair, I guess we're kind of being critical here because I see opportunities that this could be better. I think one of the things they're going for, and actually I want to give some appreciation to version 1, because one thing they are doing here is they are saying, you know what? A lot of people are practicing some type of Agile. So if you happen to be in an organization that has said, no, I won't do it, guess what? Pretty much everyone else is. So, Natalie, what do you got?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that part of this feeds into, and is probably a broader discussion, but the practice does not equate to the value. And so just doing a certain practice that is associated with Agile does not mean that everybody that's doing that practice understands the value and is getting the value out of that. And so to say that somebody's doing stand-up or they're doing retros or they're doing demos means absolutely nothing unless they understand the value and they're getting the value out of that practice.
Well, what's funny, again, later on the survey, one of the pages as I leaf through this extensive documentation, they talk about how to assess Agile. Yeah, how is success measured? And they got a whole page on it coming up. But what they don't say is that are they reporting that the 94% here is based upon all of these success factors? I mean, that's kind of where. So I think they're saying, hey, if you're since it's also on page 4, if you're a leader, guess what? everyone's doing Agile. You should think about it. Check us out. We're version 1, or listen to this Agile Life podcast, and
Are you talking about the benefits of Agile?
No, I was just...
The long list of things that have, like, apparently everybody has got this shit down.
Oh, okay. So again, Natalie's going to get an award from me tonight because she's pulling us forward to page 7. So I think page 6 here we've kind of, again, and I know we've talked about this in the past. Again, I have one thing I think that, again, I want to make sure version 1, if they do listen to us, and we do have friends of you on that listen to this Agile Life. This is a good tool. I mean, this is what the community needs, because you know what? It gets people talking and thinking. And something that's good about this survey is, you know what? There's some data that maybe doesn't make sense, or maybe that not everyone agrees with, but that makes us think about what matters. So again, there's value here. I think 94% of people doing Agile, I'd love to know what that really means. So Natalie, you want to talk about the long list of reasons for adopting Agile on page 7? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, so there's actually the next 2 pages, both 7 and 8, have the company experience and adoption, and then the following page of the benefits of Agile and the evaluation of that. Reasons for adopting Agile: accelerate product delivery is number 1, enhance ability to manage changing priorities is number 2, and increase productivity is number 3. People can look at the rest of them as they like. Accelerate product delivery. I don't know anybody that's gone through an Agile transformation. What's the first thing that happens?
It suddenly goes slower for a while.
Yeah, or from SAFe. This is where I know I've used the metaphor before. Oh, the release train derailed. We have to go pick up the cars and the nuclear waste that's spilling out into the lake. So
this is time-based, right? I mean, this needs to be a little bit more sort of like looking at the experience of the adoption is what happens in the first year, what happens in the second year, what happens in the third year. It's a progressive and iterative approach.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to see. Like, again, it's like a follow-on question in the survey. Like, now that you've answered that you think Agile helps you accelerate, what's your time period that you're basing that recommendation on? So what are the people that say is the greatest reasons of adopting Agile in the first year? It's like so a thing, if you're married or even in any kind of relationship, think about that. Like, hey, what's the greatest thing about the first year of your relationship with someone? Okay. What's the greatest thing about your 10th year of that relationship with someone? I bet they're drastically different, right?
There's also, with that in particular, there's a leadership tolerance that you need to think about, and like that's not reflective here. There's this, like I said earlier, it is so subjective, and every transformation in a company is based on what the current culture is, based on where you want to go and what your tolerance is for, sort of this fuzziness that happens to where you can get to a, high performing teams that are executing and delivering.
So here's one thing I have to admit, I really do like about page 7 is what I like about page 7 is it does draw the focus of really our community here to saying, guess what? All of these things that are on page 7, you can measure with quantitative metrics. Many organizations, either at the team level or at the org level, choose not to measure any of this stuff. And then they have no idea what's going on, and they have no idea how to actually assess if adopting Agile is providing value. So they didn't get to the specifics here of the metrics. They do that a little bit later on. But again, this is where I'm saying if you read this list, this is where I would say have a follow-on conversation with whoever is supporting you in an Agile transformation and say, how could I measure product delivery? Maybe it's how frequently do I push an update to the App Store if you're doing consumer mobile or something? And some simple metrics where, guess what? If we are trying to accelerate product delivery, we should see more frequent updates going out. That kind of stuff. So
yeah, the metrics, which is a personal sort of mission of mine on the side at the moment, is that I agree. trying to measure something is great, but make sure you're measuring the right thing is key, and that's where there needs to be some discussion around that, because some of these I don't think actually are truly measurable metrics that are providing value.
Like what? Give me an example. I mean, out of their categories.
So, what do you think improve engineering discipline means?
I would think a couple things about that. Ways you could measure that quantitatively. I know we've talked about it before. I recommend it as a practice, although Lee, you may or may not agree. Some type of out-of-the-box code complexity analysis of how clean's the code, how much repetition's in the code. Are we aligning to design patterns? Take your build, put a tool on it, get some data, look at it. So things like that.
Okay, so I see where you're going with this, and I do have to say that while I don't disagree with collecting the metrics, how metrics are used and the understanding of exactly the flaws, the error rates, and what that's actually going to do, whether it's really measuring, that's really important. And if you float those up to the management level, I can almost guarantee you that they will not be used correctly.
Well, that's true, because, again, high fidelity metrics at the team level should be kind of, I want to say, aggregated to roll up. But even like another one for engineering discipline is, think about, here's more of a process metric for the Scrum Masters listen to us that's not technical, is the number of stories where significant rework is identified during code review. So the team's doing a code review, mainly because people on the team don't understand the coding standards. So they have to block the card, kick the card back, whatever, add a new card. You can detect that in your Agile tool. I'm sure you can detect it in version 1. And at that point, guess what? As a team, we look at that in our retro. What do we need to learn so we don't have to keep redoing stuff? That's an engineering discipline thing. So you can measure it. I got a question, though, about page 7 while we're on it, which I'm curious to you guys, is that there's a little blurb about distributed Agile teams.
Yeah, I saw this one too. Go ahead.
Well, so here's my question. And I've hit this before, and I'm going to be honest. I think people use that as an excuse. It's like, because guess what? Look at us. We're doing a podcast. It's like we're talking to each other like we're in the same room. We are all in the same metropolitan area, but we are separated by many miles. And we've had people on this podcast, like we had Renee Trout on here from Australia, separated by many miles. So this whole idea of if you're distributed, I think people manufacture excuses by saying, oh, we're distributed, we need to do things differently. And I think as a community, we need to stop doing that. We just say we work together and we use the technology and the things out there to make us be able to have that co-located experience. End of discussion.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, none of us have actually met each other in person. I have met you through other This Agile Life podcasters, but I feel like I could say anything and I feel comfortable talking with you, and that is because we have made an effort to do so. And that is, I think, the key.
So my only issue with this is that I do think that the times when I'm at a co-located team, I get way better communication than when we have to go through other tools. And so I do think that communication suffers if you have to have an intermediary, even an electronic one, even a really good one.
Yeah, but this is where, again, that's what I'm saying is people use that as an excuse. And instead, I say you got to use it as to make a commitment to saying, we're going to make this work. And so I don't know if that means, you could, again, we use Skype for this podcast. I'm sure that big telco companies like Cisco can sell you some really high-end, telepresence gear if you want to invest in it. But you got to commit to saying, we're going to make it work. And we're not going to start our stand-up until the video's up. And no negotiation.
So are you going to get to a point where we need bio readouts as we're talking with people so that people know whether I'm stressed talking to you right now so that you can get that feeling? I don't think so. I'm joking, totally joking.
What are you talking about? But you got an Apple Watch?
No, I do not.
I'm serious.
I haven't bought that far into
Dude,
the whole Apple thing.
Get the Apple Watch, go to the Apple Health app, and then look at like your daily histogram of your heart rate, which it tracks and you can look at. And then put some timelines on it. Hey, what happened at 9:45 in the morning? Oh, that was when Ops called and said we had a Sev 1. Crap! I mean, put it this way. Like Lee and I work for a dev company, and we got a lot of Apple Watches floating around there, and there's a lot of data being collected. But you could start to do some very interesting things, like if you have like a critical outage, like at your organization, what is the pulse of this organization right now? Like, what's their stress level?
Have you seen? So Wimbledon did this. They handed out biometric readouts, and this is part of like what our company does. It's all done through our Orchestrate group, where they had the readout of Wimbledon. I'm sorry, I'm totally geeking out on something else. But you could you go to this website, jaguar.wimbledon.com, and you could see the readout of Wimbledon. So like when things were happening, this group, like whether their heart rates go up or their excitement levels go up.
I mean, I tell you, Adobe's got some product, and they got product and service in that space where, like, as part of their digital practice, like they're saying, because how to have an integrated content strategy where they push content that's time sensitive, and they measure all types of. Put it this way, because of things like Apple Watch, the analytics have now really started to become more biometric. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, but I saw some of those metrics for Wimbledon, and it just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I couldn't.
Like the cats watching, right? Lead back and forth. All right, well let's go forward here. Let's go on to some of the. Let's see. Here's a photo. Let's go to page 9. So this I know we've always talked about. Scrumbot is the top 5 Agile techniques. So let's if you have kids, you'll be familiar to this. What do we think is the number 1 Agile technique in practice?
That's not fair. We're sitting here looking at the page.
No. This is where you don't have kids that watch Dora, like where there's a pause so your kids can talk back to the TV.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, codependent Dora that can't make a decision and has to ask everybody else to make it for her.
Okay, well, I think codependent Dora might be involved in some Agile transformations some places, Anyway, so what do we think that could be? And the survey says,
ding, 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 ding. Scrum.
Daily stand-up.
So that hasn't changed. Actually, I think that's been the whole time they've done this. I mean, what do we think about this list?
My first thought, looking at this list, is that the first thing that I see that actually gets to the developer level, really, is retrospectives, which is like 5 down on the list.
Well, but
so yes, you're involved. Developers are involved in these other things, but they're all about project management here.
Well, and if you have to watch our video of this, because we have such awesome visuals this week, I have to pay my respects to Amos, because we have the what I would call the annual Amos bar, where the most common Agile methodology used is, of course. Oh, we're waiting for everyone to answer, right? Okay. The big bar is Scrum. So I think that's and to be fair, Scrum has progressed, and they now have started to recommend and talk about the value of the engineering practices. But Scrum is still pretty much you have your stand-up meeting, got to write your stories, groom your backlog, and I think because of the predominance of Scrum people that took the survey, that's why the data is skewed. Natalie,
and actually, if you look at the first 2 bars there, the second one is Scrum/XP hybrid. So you end up with 2/3 of the respondents using some form of Scrum.
I think what feeds into that is a few things. Scrum is certainly the most consumable way for non-Agile people to get their feet wet. Absolutely. It's prescriptive. There's guardrails.
It's Agile in the box. Open it up, play with it.
Right. and it's a starting point. And the second part of that is that Scrum or Agile will eliminate some roles. And we're still human, and we want to help people feel like they're still useful. So I think that's why it is so appealing for many people to adopt that, because between being consumable and accessible, it also is a soft way of saying you're no longer needed. Ouch.
Yeah, and the other thing I just want to throw out there that I think is interesting, because if you look across all these methodologies they've surveyed, there's Scrum/XP hybrid, there's custom hybrid, then there's Scrum Bon. So there's a lot of kind of Scrum flavor there. I don't think that's not necessarily bad. I think that's the way we get started. But I have an ask for our listeners, in particular, just to mention. We mentioned in the show notes last week. So Natalie and myself and Matt Corwell will all be at Agile 2015 in Washington D.C. in August of 2015. So if you're someone that took this survey and answered we use a custom hybrid methodology that comprises multiple methodologies, we would love to talk to you, because I would just love to know what you're doing. I just, every year I see these answers and where it's some kind of homegrown brew, and I would just love to know what that is.
So I also like the definition of single team down there. It has in parentheses beside it integrated dev and testing. Apparently those are the only two members of the team. Is you're either a dev or you're a tester.
Well, that's right, because John fired all the product owners, all the Scrum Masters, all the BAs. So that's obviously, I think that those are the people that hang out with John Sextro.
Because he has no soul, and he doesn't care about doing a soft kind of we no longer need you.
So the other one, it's funny, something I was surprised that didn't make it onto this survey anywhere this year is because the survey was largely based, a lot of the responses are the same from year to year, so they can do the correlation. But they didn't talk anything about engagement, which in the management community, that's the big push now, because they say, how do you prevent employees from leaving? And the three of us, we're from St. Louis, Missouri, in the States. We have a highly volatile labor market in our local community right now, where there's a lot of growth going on. The demand for basically anyone who is involved in IT, if you're a dev, if you're a tester, if you're a coach, the demand for help greatly exceeds the supply of talent. So management's very interested in engagement, and that didn't come up as a benefit of Agile, because if you do Agile the right way, where you empower the team, it promotes engagement. So again, for next year, I'd love to see a way that we could survey that. And of course, the practice I have to, of course, promote, which is always the second from the last, is the beautiful practice of Agile games, which only 13% of the people are doing. I actually think that's low, because Natalie, I'll ask you, what's a game? When you see this, what would you consider an Agile game?
So there's so many. There's a game that I like to mess with the team and just play a game to try and demonstrate a point. Or there's we've been playing Get Kanban with teams, and just to see if they learn something from that. So there's a whole host of things that I think that you can use to actually teach teams concepts. And whether they choose to adopt them or not it really does, in the case where I'm at, is up to the team. But you've got to expose them to different ways of thinking and approaching different ideas. I do believe that is low, but I think that's indicative of the survey group. I think these are people that they're not doing Agile. They are doing Agile. They're not being Agile. They've decided that it is advantageous for them to be a company that is Agile. They're not doing this because they believe it is the best way to conduct their day-to-day business.
Lee, what do you think?
I think I was looking at the causes of Agile project failures.
Lee's pulling us forward. I was just saying, because so Natalie, your definition of an Agile game was very much, I want to say, I'm going to call it hardcore. Like, hey, we're going to go in the conference room and break out Russ Healy's game or DeMonica DeGrandis' game for DevOps, or I'm going to show up with the Lego, and do that. Almost for, I want to say, a training or learning benefit. I'm questioning if when people answer this question, like if you're doing something like Speedboat in your retrospective, because I would consider that's a game because it's immersive, it's visual, it's transparent, it gets people talking, it can be a little bit of fun. It's like, I'm going to throw a bomb and sink the speedboat. I question if people answered that because I think that number's higher. I hope it is. If not, as a community, we should make it higher.
So how many of us out there actually make up new games, new retro games, new ways to teach a concept? I'm
not a good sample. I kind of help plan a conference where that's what all we do. So
right. So and I think that, but I ask that for exactly that point. As Agile coaches or leaders in this movement, that's what you do, right? You find different ways to explain the same concept because people learn differently, and that's where if that number is so low, people the ones that are teaching it to them are not getting through because they're repeating the same tired old processes.
Yeah, and it's funny because I would
Good
say
point.
I would wonder if there's a correlation then between that and like again a large number of beginners taking this survey, but it seemed like going back I remember, like, I think 2 years ago, we noticed that there were a lot of beginners that took the survey, right? Looking at their data, the survey is at least a little bit more distributed now where it's kind of equal, but who knows? So, bottom line is go play a game if you haven't played one, and if you like them, maybe go figure out how to build one if you want to learn how to do it. I don't know.
Go to Agile Games Conference.
Or better yet.
Yes.
Come try my no sleep guarantee, no fall asleep guarantee at Agile 2015, where I've issued I guarantee that if you come to my session on Friday morning after the party where we're going to talk about games and play Fire Dice, you will not fall asleep, guaranteed. Please stay up all night and party, and then come to the session, you will not fall asleep, guaranteed. So, all right, so going on, what's next? Ooh, I got a good one. Lee, what do you see on page 10? Anything?
On page 10, I think it's interesting that the barriers to further Agile adoption, the top one is ability to change organizational culture, 44%. And I think that's telling in some way.
Well, and I'll share, I liked that was a top one, and I put a star by it because I think it's way higher than 44%.
Yeah.
Because I think we're talking about, especially... It varies from vertical to vertical and market to market, but Agile, where we talk about collective, shared work, no heroes, sustainable process. If we're, we shouldn't have to call people in on the weekend, that kind of stuff, which some organizations have embraced that and they value it and they incentivize it. And that it's so deep. This change is so interesting. I'll tell you, it's actually easy to have a little bit of success early on, and then you can stall. It's like we're stuck, and how do we get beyond that? And you got to wait. It's patience. So I think 44 is a low number there.
Well, I also wanted to point to another 44 on this same page. Under the leading causes of failed Agile products, the top one there was actually lack of experience with Agile methods. I think that is a totally lame excuse.
Well, why? Tell me.
Because if because you lack experience with the methods, that doesn't mean that maybe it's they don't have help along the way. If you're trying to take these on all by yourself and you're reading a book or listening to some silly podcast and trying to figure out how to do Agile from that, then maybe I could see where this could come in.
All right, Natalie, what do you got?
So, I'm actually writing a blog about this right now. It's still the blog is in progress, but it actually likens people naturally falling into Agile practices while gaming without even knowing what Agile is. So we have an objective. The objective is to kill the boss. We all die, fail miserably. What do? The first thing we do is we come back, we do a retrospective. We talk about what went wrong, how can we do it better, and then we approach it again and rinse and repeat. So this is a human activity. It's not an agile activity. It's not this mystical sort of like source that comes off, like that only a few people know. It is a natural way of dealing with obstacles in people's lives. For most people, it's not everybody. But it's our responsibility to help others that don't have those skills to pull them along and get to that point.
That's a really cool way to put it. I'm anxious to read that blog. But do you guys think that this number is so high because so many of the people that took the survey were doing Scrum, where they focus so heavily on practices and not on behaviors?
I think I think, Lee, I don't agree with that statement, because I think what you're saying is somewhat a function of the Scrum trainer who showed up for the workshop you went to. Because I've seen Scrum trainers that emphasize, I would say, equal time between values and practices. I have seen Scrum trainers that are, hey, let's just talk about what you actually do, and it's all practices, no values. And I've actually seen a few that are actually more on, I want to say, more of a discovery approach, where let's talk about the values and what makes sense. You guys figure out how to make these practices go. So,
okay, so I just have a bad view of Scrum that isn't earned, is what you're saying.
I think, to be fair, Scrum is a global movement. It's kind of interesting to look at the posturing between the Scrum Alliance and the Agile Alliance. I think that is, I want to say it's kind of a community issue, because look at we got the Agile Alliance conference coming up in August 2015, and, Scrum just had their big state conference and it was in Phoenix back in May, and they had the one in Shanghai. So, they're like a separate movement almost. It's, I think, growing. To where it's, anyways, Natalie, what you got?
So I think, to be brutally honest, I think Scrum is self-serving, right? It is a self-perpetuating, I am always going to be in this position. And the way that we've approached it is that Scrum is a gateway, and eventually you will work yourself out of being needed in that team. And if you're doing it right, if you're constantly teaching the value why and the principles behind it, you're not needed in that team. You you become less of a blocker or a dependency for that team, because they get it. They can run with it. They don't need you there. That doesn't mean to say that I don't. I actually believe that there is always still a need for an agile guidance coach type of role within an organization, because changes happen to teams where they go off track, and you need to help guide them back to the path. But that's where the path. You're laughing at me, Jason.
Yes, I am.
Tell me why.
I know a lot about paths lately.
It's not a religion.
No, it's not. So it's interesting, because
it does have a good bit of dogma, though.
As we're talking about the 44s, though, because Lee linked them together, I do have one. Looking at them, I do have a theory, and it's unfortunately kind of something I think that is I want to call it an unfortunate truth of where we are with Agile, is the fact that 44% of people say that they experience failure because they have a lack of experience. I think that is indicative of a critical leadership problem, in that we are not comfortable allowing people to fail so they can actually learn what works and what doesn't. So that basically is why we are saying 44% of our projects fail because of lack of experience, which really, to me, goes back to that idea of organizational change, to saying, you know what? We're going to start something. We're going to try this practice. We're going to try to do this differently. And you know what? We might not be successful. We might lose money. We might have to bail it out. And guess what? Agile is different because we can manage that. We could say it's a small experiment. It's only 2 weeks of a team's time. So maybe we have to flush that iteration or that sprint down the toilet. But guess what? We didn't invest a year building something. We invested 2 weeks. So it's okay to fail. And I think if 44% of the people are saying they have like experience, they're not being allowed to learn by failing, which is a critical problem.
So can I ask a question to you guys? Along the lines of how do we measure success? How do we measure failure? How do we decide when a project is a failed project? Obviously, you could have something where, well, you didn't deliver the product, but I don't know that many projects that don't deliver a product. It may not be the one they wanted. It may not be on time, all those kind of things. Is that what they're talking about when they say a project failed? And is that what the respondents of this survey were thinking when you think of why projects fail?
My evaluation of that is that the number one metric is working software, but followed very, very closely is working software that somebody actually wants. So to me, that's the number one. That is the principle. That's what we're all trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of the discussion that we have right there, it goes back to what is the appetite for leadership to have some leeway. And it has been my experience that without leadership buy-in, Agile transformations are challenged or / doomed to failure. You have to have at some level of very senior leadership some buy-in. Groundswell movements just don't seem to go well.
Well, but I think we got to be truthful there, Natalie, because and this comes from, actually, to be fair, I think the best way that this got injected into the Agile community was through Scaled Agile. And it's really acknowledging the lean practice from Toyota of effective leadership at all levels, relevant for the work at hand. Because, again, I think we might have all seen those environments where you can have effective, bought-in, and supportive leadership at the top, doing the things that the executives need to do. You can have effective, that kind of groundswell, hey, let's try these cool new Agile things and set up a build server and do pair programming and all, at the team level. And then, based upon the size of the organization you're in, I can reenact my character of the past of Mr. Big Enterprise. You could get stuck where, there's that middle management layer that kind of starts to cause thrashing, and that's tough to navigate. And you got to have leadership up and down all levels of the org, or flatten the org, or as some people would say, get rid of the org to elicit and empower people to change.
Middle management is absolutely a key concern in a transformation because they immediately become threatened. You're talking about taking, say, a development manager, and all of his guys are now on teams where they're responsible for that particular team's goals, and they're removed. They're not part of it. And they start to search for ways to be important.
And worse, there's this scary, completely always misunderstood thing called self-managing teams, which managers like, if the team self-manages, what do I do?
Well, and that's where it becomes that management truly needs to start reevaluating their role, but they need guidance in doing so because they now become the proponents for the self-development of each of those individuals, not the day-to-day management of tasks. And that's a switch, it's a total switch. Yeah. You now become a proponent for the person rather than their day-to-day tasks. And that can still work. If you're actually going to be a person that starts to look at the individual and their career path, and it's actually more of a management role than just managing, okay, today do X, Y, Z.
But two things, because keep in mind, we're talking about things that Agile needs to be successful. And this is where, again, big, crazy, Mr. Big Enterprise would say, people may not be empowered to do that, and so, and on top of that, there's also, and this is another unfortunate truth, sometimes you've got a person where for this to be successful, Natalie, to what you're saying, they need to grow and they need to emerge into doing the exact things that you're talking about, which is really serving people. And unfortunately, sometimes there's people in that middle management level that aren't equipped to do that or aren't motivated to do that. And that's sad because, again, it's a great opportunity. I think all of us on this podcast like doing it. But to be respectful, some people out there don't get that, and so...
But, yeah, they weren't hired to be that kind of manager. They were hired to be a different kind.
Yeah.
And that's where, it comes down to some fairly brutal discussions of, are you, given the direction you're going, are you still the right mix for the company?
Yeah, and so I think that I think it's funny because that goes back to full circle on this organizational change, where sometimes to achieve organizational change, if you, again, do a root cause analysis. What are your impediments? And it's unfortunate that many times there are people in the organization who technically, because of just who they are and their impediments, it's tough. So.
All right, so what's our next one? Because we're
almost out of time. We're almost out of time. I think we go past that.
I want to get to what was the one? Scaling Agile.
You want to get to scale? Did I skip that? Oh no. Well, let's talk about this.
This is on.
Let's talk about page
13.
Page 12. How do we measure success on a day-to-day basis? And the number one answer is an imaginary number divided by an arbitrary amount of work. Velocity. Okay.
Oh, don't anchor.
Thank you, Jim Benson. I don't have anything to say for that. Just please. Velocity. Velocity is like, I don't know. Would I be? Am I going to limit? Some people, like Jim Benson, would say zero value in the practice because it's all made up. And I think velocity is a very coarse grained metric. I think if a team wants to track velocity and use it for kind of a day-to-day health check or maybe a sprint-to-sprint, fine. Keep it simple. Count stories. Don't use it for anything beyond that because there are better things you should measure, like cycle time. We could do a whole podcast on that.
So, no, I actually agree with cycle time. And we've got a couple of teams that are actually tracking points and cycle time. And it's kind of funny the way that both of those correlate.
Yeah,
say more about that, Natalie. I'm curious.
So there's one team in particular that has been tracking this for quite some time. And they've, the person that is leading that team has both practiced Kanban methods as well as Scrum. And what I'm seeing from their metrics is that regardless of story complexity, size, whatever, the number of cards and the number of points are very, very close. I quite honestly, I just saw these today. And I want to learn more about why it is the case. But I think that it comes down to, my guess is a story is a story. And the team has a capacity for a certain amount of items to come through. And it becomes a story. A story is just a story. It doesn't matter what the story points are associated with it. But that is a high-level guess.
Do you think the stories that they're creating are generally the same
Similar
size?
in size? Yes.
Yeah.
I think that, and with a mature team, you see that, right? They all tend to, they naturally seem to break down stories to a certain level. And that's where the team becomes comfortable with, yes, we can consume that. And then the estimation becomes irrelevant because it's the number of cards that they get through in any given iteration.
And just awareness, that's been studied by, actually I think it's been studied and published by Troy McGinnis as part of his probabilistic forecasting model about, it's really from the law of natural numbers that just talks about how as a team develops a mental model, that just happens. He even says it happens as soon as you have 12 data points. So
yeah. Well, and it's always as a coach, it's always that that awesome moment that where you see the team, where you go from those torturously long estimation sessions to those everyone's you get the trifecta where everybody holds up the same amount of the same amount of fingers for the points on the card, and they all kind of go oh wow, we kind of get each other now. So yeah.
Okay, so I got some real life advice here from version 1, and this is interesting. because on this podcast in the past, there's been lots of blogs out there. I know when we had Renee Trout on, she talked about this, is that how sometimes in the Agile coaching field, we're challenged to say, what value do we provide as coaches, right? Who's experienced this? Yes, we have. And what I think is interesting is, what is the primary metric we're using to measure success? A imaginary number about an arbitrary amount of work, velocity, okay? What I think is fascinating about this list, real life, is that you guys know I do a lot of portfolio stuff. The metrics that we always, that business stakeholders, every time we do a portfolio inception, and we say, well, how are we going to measure the success and the ROI from our investments in this portfolio? Guess what we do? Go from the bottom up. Things that we always end up building out instrumentation for. Product utilization. Are people actually using the product and the features? How does each feature we deploy impact revenue? Okay. How do we retain customers? I go from the bottom up. The value, the relative value of each epic we complete or each feature. A flow diagram to show me progress and show me throughput. Scope chain. I mean, literally, if you want to know what to measure really at any level, take this list, start from the bottom up. I'm serious. This is, I've said this at conferences. We don't measure enough we don't measure enough. That's my statement. And when we do measure, we measure the wrong things. This is data that proves it. We measure all these things that are based upon made up numbers, and you can't use that for any type of scientific guidance. And so stop doing that. Thank you, version 1, for making this transparent. If anyone should do it, I'll do a lightning talk on this at the Agile conference, because this is fascinating. This is good data. This is actually a good thing in this survey. So okay, enough. I'll shut up.
Good data because it's reversed.
Well, I think this is, again, use the information we have discovered, Lee, on this podcast, where sometime, and at all the Agile conferences, there's always like an open space meetup about, as Agile coaches, we need to come together and figure out as a community, how do we justify our existence? I mean, that's always there, okay? Sorry, it is there. And it's important because there's a lot of value to this profession. People who have invested heavily their careers and their personal brands in Agile coaching, again, some people goes out, people think a Scrum Master is a coach. That's not a true statement. This is symptomatic to say that as a community, this is the best thing in the story that says we are not measuring the right things, and hence we are choosing our own fate, where we then have to answer these weird questions about the value we provide. If as a community we measure the right things, or even if as a coach, guess what? You measure the right things for the clients you're supporting, I'm going to hypothesize you're not going to have a problem saying what value do you provide helping them improve. So anyways, if you want to talk more about it, connect with me. We should hash this out on Twitter.
To be fair, page 11 talks about Agile success and metrics. How is success measured with Agile initiatives? And they do have product quality, customer satisfaction, business value. They're all within the top 4. Now, number 1 is on-time delivery, but still, those things that you're talking about are high up there.
But that's messed up too, Lee, because you know what this means? That, again, this is now fine. When did we take these measurements on page 11? At the end of the project? Whatever. No, guess what? If we want to measure success, do this the right way, what does Agile tell us? We want a fast feedback loop. So you know what? Guess what? Page 11, rip it up. You don't need it, okay? For fun. Here, I rip it up real life. Here, I'm ripping it up, okay? This is the best episode ever, this Agile Life. So, page 12, set yourself up to measure every day. And guess what? To be fair to V1, they make a tool that does it. There's other tools that do it. Make sure you got data that you can make decisions on a day-to-day basis so you can pivot as you need to. Natalie, say something. We're moving on.
So, yeah, I need to add a couple of things.
Okay,
there.
Let me have it. Let me have it.
Like if you can calm yourself down. Oh. So on the Agile coaching, there's certainly a growing trend out there. If you're looking at a job post, no, Mr. Employer, I'm not looking for another job. But there is a growing trend for people to have a primary skill in X and be an Agile coach. It's no longer there. There's the trend seems to be going away from just being an Agile coach. This is coaching is going to become a plus skill. It's not going to be the one and only. That is my belief. Feel free to.
Why? Do you think that's where we've kind of lost the war and the space?
No.
The space of people that call themselves coaches is kind of bloated with people that don't know what they're doing, and they kind of tarnish the nature of the work?
So in some aspects that could be the case, but as far as losing the war, I think it's a complete opposite. It's winning the war. This is an ingrained practice that it's not something that you need to constantly have somebody telling you what to do. You actually just do it.
Well, or like you said, it's a mindset. So, and maybe you need, something that like the firm that Leah and I work for, we actually have some metrics on, like we see that there's the need for like a coach to kind of maybe help get a team going. But then one of the things that coach does is effectively, you should have yourself be out of a job, and like,
yes,
move on. And if you're, put this way, if you're in corporate and you're a large corporation, correct me if I'm wrong, now that's kind of what you do, where guess what? You get a team going, you ramp them up, you help them, you help them understand and implement, good practices that support Agile values, and you get them going, you say, I'm done, and then you move on to the next new project or new team, right?
Right. And I think that there's a threshold with the size of a company and the base level of expertise is that at any time a team can change drastically based on one team member coming in or a change in direction. And all of a sudden you're back to storming and you've got to start all over again and build that team up. So there's considerations in all of that. I don't want to just wipe that away, but the trend I'm seeing in general is that Agile coaching is going to be a +1 skill. It's not necessarily the only skill. The other thing around metrics is something that I think that we are certainly starting to focus on more. Metrics, just for metrics' sake, is nothing, and it's developing that discussion around what are meaningful metrics, which is basically all that we've been talking about tonight. Are these meaningful? Do they help us? Do they give us information that we can make decisions on, move forward on? And the discussions that we're having are discussions that teams should be having. Like, we're collecting metrics X. What does it do for us? Is it really valuable? Should we continue to collect it? So I think that this translates into conversations that need to be happening in teams.
I got one that's fascinating because I guess I'm as a hobby, I'm a health guy. You guys know I do yoga. Because one of the new fads out there, actually it's a good practice thing for teams doing mobile, is, they put like their Crashalytics up in their team area. So how many people are using our app right now live? When was the last time our app crashed? How many app crashes we had today? I'd love to see, again, if everyone's got that Apple Watch, as that data trends, how does that impact the physiology of the people on the team?
Or if you want a cheaper solution, you can get pretty much any number of about 100 other Android watches that have been out for a few years.
Whatever.
Bam!
It's all about the brand, man. It's all about the brand. Sorry. Okay, so I think number one, you guys hang with us. We're running long here, but I hope you find this interesting. Remember, this is a podcast. You can pause it, okay? So, take a break if you need to. It's like that home run derby. Be like Prince Fielder. Take your time out and go eat cotton candy if you need to.
I really need us to go into scaling Agile.
Yes,
and
we need to.
I'm just going to phone it in from there.
Oh, you are? Are you gonna be like Prince Fielder and just knock it out of the Great American Ballpark at the home run derby? All right, so here comes Natalie. She's coming to the plate. We're gonna start throwing her some easy balls, and she's gonna whack it out of the Great American Ballpark. Okay, well, let us have it. Natalie, what is the state of scaled Agile?
First off, what is baseball? What's that game?
Oh, I think you call it cricket, right?
Oh, cricket, yes. More boring than golf. Scaling Agile. So my question to everybody is this just a goddamn excuse to come up with some pithy frickin' acronym that will sound really cool and look good on some kind of icon, and you can sell it to dopey ass people that don't know any better? Such as, let's read them off, shall we? Let's start with SAFe. This is really
wrong. Time out.
SAFe.
Time out. So the first one it says is Scrum and Scrum of Scrums.
Well, no, but yeah, Okay. Like we'll do Scrum.
There are an awful lot of acronyms on here, though.
No, but the ones that actually call out their acronym, that's the ones that I'm going to. So Scrum and Scrums don't come up with an acronym.
Okay, and then it goes...
But SAFe certainly does.
Well, and again, advertise... if you're going to Agile 2015 and you are using one of these internally created methods that actually probably works, we would love to talk to you, just because I think that would be interesting. So, okay, so Natalie, let's talk about acronym soup. Go for it.
SAFe. So this just invokes a feeling of like, oh, warm and fuzzies. I want to use it. It's going to make me safe. I'll keep my job. I'm not taking any risks. I'm like this is going to be a walk in the park. I'm safe. Well, a walk in the park, you could get like, hijacked and,
Natalie is moonlighting as a branding consultant now. So... I heard there's this guy, Dean Leffingwell, he might be looking for some guidance on positioning.
The next one that has an acronym is Agile Portfolio Management, APM, whatever.
But
I actually respect that the fact that it doesn't try and mean something else.
Well, but see, that's not prescriptive. That to me is a collection of practices where I think version 1 put an acronym on it, but there's not a brand. I mean, there's no brand name on that. Like SAFe is a brand. The ones you're going to talk about next are branded and
okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it says here Enterprise Agile 10%. What the heck is that?
Do we know what it is?
Well, to me, that's an internally created method. It's the same as
Enterprise Scrum.
Well, yeah, and how is that different from Scrum? So, and maybe someone will call our bluff on this, and maybe there's a white paper that someone's published that says this is what the sacred practice of Enterprise Agile is, and we don't know about it, but
so we are essentially clueless right now.
I think that you're kind of going back to this way. So I sieged on the velocity stat in this, which I think is again symptomatic of a problem in the community that we're not measuring the right things. I think here you're seizing on the fact that we're kind of creating complexity and frameworks for the purpose of creating complexity and frameworks, when in reality we should be focusing on, having a vision of where we're going and making small incremental steps to achieve improvement.
Yep. And
at that point, guess what? I think in real life, what this graph is going to look like in 10 years when we get good at this as a community is that 100% of anyone who says they're scaling Agile is probably doing some type of what I'm going to call a hybrid method, which is a combination of just maybe some of, things that work that got wired together within the context of what an organization actually needed.
So thank you, and I totally agree. So I'm going to start the next one with the sentence of, we're doing dad. How does that sound?
That sounds kind of dirty.
So this is disciplined, awkward, agile delivery. But that's being dad or doing dad.
Well, but it's funny, and I oh crap! I need to I'll put this on Twitter, or if I can find it as you're talking. There was a guy at Big Apple Scrum Day from Rally. I forget his name. He's one of the Rally coaches, who did like a comparative analysis of all of these. Like he had a chart. It was fast because these frameworks actually recommend different things if you put them up side by side, which I think is a great place to get some ideas for your organization. So guess what? If you're, say I want to scale Agile and you've never looked at anything other than SAFe, stop. Go look around, because there are some other ideas out there. Or if you've done DAD and haven't looked at SAFe, go look around. Or again, go to bigapplescrumday.org and find this guy's paper that I sat in the first. I said, this is awesome. I was probably the only guy enjoying the session because I'm into this stuff. But yeah, so what's the last one we have up here?
Well, actually, we have two more, because the next one is that you can advertise that you're less, which is large scale Scrum, and they've chosen their acronym to be less. So we're less. That's the second last one.
So it's it's a lightweight method.
No, but who is going to advertise that they're less?
I don't know.
Right. And then the next one would be rage. We're rage.
I like that one.
I'm not surprised.
I
Jason.
like that one. I'm bumming. That should have been mine. Yeah. And what's funny is that's a white paper that looks like it dropped in 2013, and it's kind of gone dormant. And it has 1% of the sample here, so I wondered like if the one person who authored that white paper maybe filled out the survey. So, and let me ask you this: what's missing? There is a new kid on the block that does have some traction. It's not even here.
What is that?
It is the one and only, superior to all of these agile methods, Enterprise Service Planning (ESP) by the one and only David J. Anderson.
I guess
he's got his own big picture, and he's got his own collection of vendors that are building tooling to support it, and so it's not even on the radar chart here. But guess what? It's out there, everybody, and he's pushing it. So, and there's some good things about it. So,
I guess where my rage comes from all of this, and not my rage as in recipes for agile governance in the enterprise, that not that kind of rage, is that all of these further the practice of saying, if you're not doing this, you're not doing the right thing. And I want people to think independently and evaluate their practices and say, this doesn't work for us because of X, Y, and Z, whatever. We're going to try this.
Or better,
and not all of a sudden say, well, we're no longer agile.
Or better yet, going back to the last one, this is how this change impacts our bottom line. You can measure that. People say, I can't. No, yes, you can. You got to put it this way. John wants to fire all the BAs. You got some BAs, give them a little project. Say, go figure out how we can measure the economic impact of completing that epic to our bottom line. That's a business analysis task. And then guess what? Measure that. How many of those do we get done? How much ROI do we have on our investment? I do have one last one about this, Natalie, which I think is indicative of what we're talking about, what we see here with this obsession with alphabet soup and prescriptive copyrighted frameworks that say, buy my stuff, is that people say the tips for scaling Agile is having consistent process and practices. And in particular, like Lee, what do you think about that?
Consistent. I think it's a hard thing to talk about because from one side, I totally agree with that. I think that creating habits within a team is a good way to make the team kind of self-organizing. However,
you must pair program.
Yeah, that's the other problem. That's the second side of it, right? If you have consistency, that means that are you never changing? Are you not actually doing anything with your retrospectives? So I'm not sure if it depends on what they mean by being consistent.
I have some thoughts around that with the consistent process, and we've recently gone through some changes, and I think that there's this sort of like smaller set of not so much constraints as guidelines or must-haves. I don't want to say they're mandatory, but they kind of are. But they're at any company, right? There's certain things you have to fill out timesheets. You have to wear pants to work. You know, there's things that you have to do in order to turn up at work. So, and I think within any practice at any company, there are things that you need to do, but limiting that and then allowing the team to decide the rest, I think and being clear about what that is a key way to have consistent process, yes, but minimal process.
Well, and having spent, again, something I want to say about this is I liked seeing this because it's so close, but it's wrong. It's like Ghostbusters. Close, but definitely wrong in terms of what we're saying here. Because I think people, because of scaled agile alphabet soup that we just talked about, people think that they can achieve predictability by having consistent process where it's the same across all my teams. It's cookie cutter. That's wrong. What we should have is consistent measurement criteria that we use to manage risk. And at that point, guess what? Team, go do whatever you want. But we need you to provide transparency to what you're doing so we can run our business. And guess what? Then team has autonomy to go self-organize and do whatever. and management and leadership has the information they need to run an effective business. So that's consistent measurement criteria, not a consistent process. Makes sense? Or Liu, you should want to throw a rock at me because I know you're not a metrics fan, but I think people take these away. They want to draw a diagram. Here's what we do. Don't draw a diagram. Say, how do we want to measure it to manage risk? All right, so we got like 2 more pages of this for fun. This has been hopefully been... More?
No, wait, I was really, when you brought up Ghostbusters, I was really hoping you were going to mention something about dogs and cats living together, but that's fine.
Don't cross the streams. Thou cannot practice Scrum and Kanban at the same time.
No, the Marshmallow Man.
They're it will, the worst possible thing will come into your own, just like Dean Leffingwell and David Anderson, two-headed monster. Okay, that'd be pretty funny. So I think we should do some Agile persona. We should be entertaining. Okay, so let's. Here's another metric. So we're on page 14, general tools and user preferences. I know we started talking about this one before we turned the recorder on tonight, and we got to talk about this because this was. I'm concerned, Lee. Tell us about it.
So I'm concerned as well because to me this whole thing has some very, very bad trends here. If the trends continue, let me just go down the list real quick, and I'm not going to give you the numbers. I'm going to give you whether they went up or down or stayed the same. And just listen to this: bug trackers down, task boards down, spreadsheets up, wikis down, agile project management tools down, unit test tool no change, automated build tools down, continuous integration tool down, Kanban board up, traditional project management tool up, requirements management tool up, release deployment automation barely up but up, index cards down.
Oh, that's because we had to say paper.
Yeah. Project and portfolio management tool up.
Heck
big
yeah!
Time,
woo!
big time up. Yeah. Automated acceptance tool up. Story mapping tool down.
That was so 2014 story mapping. Okay, we need to move forward.
Refactoring tool down. Customer idea management, whatever the heck that is, up.
That's Salesforce.
To me, that's some really sad stuff.
Isn't there something over, like, people over processes and tools or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So a couple of things. Number one, who knows? Number one, the changes were not super. The big changes were, again, things like story mapping tool did go way down. Portfolio management tool went way up, but some of these were just like 1 or 2%. Kanban board went way up. So again, people are. David Anderson and Jim Benson are like converting the world over to Kanban, I think. So
yeah, Kanbans and spreadsheets apparently.
Yeah, but here's what I don't get. Number one, so I'm questioning this is probably a sampling error because some beginners. But again, if we're moving forward with this continuous deployment DevOps thing, which is hot right now, people are trying to hire for it. People are blogging about it. New conferences are popping up all over just about DevOps. I don't understand how you could do that and not have an automated build tool. I would say that should be trending up. If it's trending down, I'm like, that's weird. And the same thing with continuous integration. If we're not having consistent feedback on our tests, and we want to get to where we can just release software continuously, we seem to be going in the wrong direction, I think is what we're trying to say here, which is a little concerning. So I guess we watch this. The traditional project management tool going up is kind of interesting. So wonder what V1 thinks about that.
I guess what I would summarize this as is there's a lot of tools here.
So?
Double entendre tools.
Well, but it's a balance. Okay, again, fine. We're not going to have an automated build tool, Natalie? What? We're going to go hire a build master and pay him a salary to have him sit around and do builds by hand? Or what, are we going back to the 80s?
No, well, I'm certainly not speaking about specifically that one. But you look at this list, how many tools do we need?
Well, that sounds like a version 1 sales pitch right there. But the Buy our tool.
I can get a job out of this.
Well, you could do the whole. Again, to be fair, their tool. To be fair, it does the whole stack. You can go everywhere from the team to the portfolio in one tool. So and again, that's valuable. That gets. Put this way, you want to get those earned value metrics. You could build a custom report in Excel and extract data from your team level tool and do that, or to give credit to the vendors, they have product that does that. You simply turn it on and it works. I think what this is saying, what I see here, Natalie, and what I'm thinking of Amos, because one thing that I know Amos challenged me when we worked. He's like, Jason, why are you packaging the build by hand this week? I was like, well, Amos, we had a team, we only released once every 3 weeks. So we didn't automate it. We never got around to automating our packaging and deployment. We did it by hand. He's like, do you realize that over a year that, yeah, it takes you probably a half hour. He's like, that's almost a whole day of extra time. So a lot of these tools to be called to, are you automating the right things so you have time to do value add work? Which is something Amos is very passionate about. So
my comment on that is that I'm wary of so many tools because it takes the decision making out on you saying that, you know what, 6 hours of work each year or like manually doing that build is not worth us doing 3 days of development. Like that trade-off, because tools oftentimes can abstract that.
Well, or guess what? The team, I set up the automated build. It just works. The team changes because people change. And next thing you know, no one knows how it actually works because who knows where I quit. I went and go work. I worked somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. But you weigh those things.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting. By the way, this to me was one of the highlights of this story because I thought it was, again, if you want to go down the DevOps road and you're not automating your build, good luck. Connect with us on thisagilelife.com and let us know how you're doing. So,
are we moving on to project management tools? I think this.
Well, I think we're done with that. We already spoiled that one. What you got from that?
Excel.
So
Excel is awesome. It's like really, really cool.
What I don't like about how they surveyed this is that they don't talk about like physical tools. Like what about just cards on a wall? They had that listed elsewhere, but I mean, these are all basically your vendor tools, and I know some teams that they effectively do and track daily metrics, the same thing that all these tools do, using cards on a wall.
Yep.
So I wish they had a data point for that. So
the Microsoft Project is an effective Agile tool is pretty impressive too.
Well, that says that this is what people are using. They didn't say it was effective.
Well,
but I think what you're saying is that, again,
but that's indicative of that's indicative of the quality of all of the other responses, right? If 50% of the people are using that, then that's how they're gauging their answers on all of the other questions.
But are we confusing people? Because again, I would love to see a usage pattern. I'm sorry, if you go into MSP, Microsoft Project, and you plot out 18 months of milestones with fixed dates, on a Gantt chart, that is not an Agile practice. I mean, I'll show you. Jira's got an interesting plugin, like where you can plan your releases and it will auto-generate a Gantt chart for you. A little different approach, kind of the same thing. I'm okay with that one, but should Microsoft Project even be on this list?
Well, I totally agree with that, but let's also take another view of this, which is for this particular metric, respondents were able to make multiple selections, right? So it's like, what tools do you use on a daily basis to help you to run your project, right? Well, we take our metrics from our cards and put them in an Excel spreadsheet, and suddenly Excel becomes used there.
Well, I think that's okay. Yeah. That's good. Now I have a question for you, because you're like me. You're kind of in a big organization. Is there any appropriate pattern to use MSP?
No,
because I'm gonna say that if you want to do like a high level, I want to say no more than a year, like an investment theme roadmap where you want to show, hey, in March these are the themes I'm investing in, and and it's high level, it's not detailed, no milestones, just like bars. If you want to do that in MSP, I think that's okay.
So one of the areas where like a pure infrastructure deployment that is potentially all date driven by deliverables of like equipment onto a data center and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I could be persuaded, but I still think that you could do it just as well in other tools. But
the thing I think about MSP is that what happens is even if you try to use it, and I'll share, I've tried to help some organizations use it at a very lightweight level because they asked for it. It becomes an avalanche. It's like, it's MSP. I could go in and I can add milestones and I can add blowouts and I can add all this stuff. And I was like, no, stop. So that's the danger I see there. The other thing I see here that's interesting, and this to me, I think I as usual never know who vendor X and vendor Y is, but not on this. Again, from the David Anderson community or the Kanban community. There is a whole bunch of these Kanban vendors not represented here. LeanKit is on the list, but most of them are from Europe. That kind of, again, it's the whole Kanban crew. Cost of ownership of those Kanban tools is typically much less than the tools on this list because they're all being developed by startups. So I'm curious to see if over time we start to see like Kanbanize and what Swift Kanban, some of these other, again, lightweight tools aligned to Kanban that have capability to support enterprise service planning, which is what David Anderson's pushing. I'm curious to see when they pop up on the list here. Maybe that will happen next year. And I think at that point if we've finished, of course, satisfaction with Agile project management tool choice. Who won that one?
Let's see. Who actually created this survey?
Think really hardly. It's a difficult one.
It's V1. Okay, all kidding aside, this is serious, guys, because this goes back to what we talked about what you should be measuring. So if you're building a product, what V1 is kind of measuring, and if anything bragging about here, is they are responsive to their customers' needs and they're listening to their customers. If you're on a team doing Agile, are you doing that? Like, so what are you doing to get real life customer feedback about the software you're writing? So I appreciate V1 because in the process of making this survey and kind of the way they've put it together, they're demonstrating some of the practices where I think as a community, we can get better. So again, practice what we preach. So Natalie.
Or is it that their tool is so bad, they get so much customer feedback that's why they're so focused on customer satisfaction? Because the tool should just work. They shouldn't.
Again, I think the fact that and you could wonder, because I would assume since they do publish this survey, they probably have higher fidelity data about their own users than everyone else.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're concluding the survey by emphasizing what I'm going to say is I think an essential practice. I think very few organizations do this effectively and do it enough. And if they do it, they primarily do it on their external consumer-facing things. And again, if you're like, and again, Natalie, your organization, correct me if I'm wrong, your teams write internal software, right?
Yes.
Like software that your employees are forced to use whether they like it or not. So again, you want to go from good to great with Agile. As an organization, what are you doing to assess that the software that you're building for your own employees is actually effective?
So I believe that some of their previous statistics are inconsistent with their customer satisfaction. If you're saying that your customers are satisfied, that's a subset of customers. And a lot of other customers have chosen to go with Excel rather than V1. So is it truly representative of their customer satisfaction, or people have tried it and decided not to go with it?
Well, I think there's also the tendency here that it's kind of like the whose apple pie is better, right? Whoever just made me the apple pie and is asking me how I like it. So if I'm asking the question, I'm more likely to get a positive response saying
or incentivized you with a carrot and stick reward of saying fill out my survey and you may win a Jambox.
Right.
So part of this is it's percentage is great, but percentage of what uses. If Verizon is 92% of 100 people and Microsoft Project is 53% of 20,000, it's a very different picture, isn't it?
Well, and there you have it. So our annual recount of the version 1 State of Agile survey, which I hope has made you guys think. So full disclosure, This Agile Life is an independent podcast and has received no remuneration from version 1 for anything that we said tonight. Which probably shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone here. But at the same time, as I said a few times, and I want to let you guys share some thoughts, I want to appreciate version 1 for doing this because, as we've said, in one of our motivations at This Agile Life is to really provide some insights and some things to promote us to think and grow as a community. And so if there's one thing that version 1 does every year pretty effectively, probably more effectively than anyone else out there, they do invest they spend some money to make this thing happen, and it's definitely something that will make us think. So I offer my most sincere gratitude for that because it gives us something interesting to talk about. And so that's my pick for tonight, is saying that, if you haven't actually read the survey, go download it. We'll put the link to where you can go download it in our show notes, and so you can download it and give us some feedback on if you thought we're in left field or whatever. I'm sure Natalie, Jason, and Matt, and we'll have VIP passes to the version 1 party at Agile 2015. Not! So, but again, and if you've never tried V1, check it out. Check out all the tools out there. They all work a little differently, and they'll help you out. So,
this week's
hottest picks.
Lee, what's your pick?
So my pick tonight is actually something that I found through one of the people that I've been working with. They pointed me to a thing called Developing for Android, an introduction. So this is actually written, it's out on Medium Corp, and the link's there, medium.com. This is actually written by some of the Android developers from Google. And they created this series of articles talking about just the best practices for Android development. And reading through this thing, it's actually really good. It's lots of stuff. Even if you're it's kind of written for programmers that have already been doing other languages, or specifically Java, C++, that kind of stuff. You're going to really enjoy this stuff. It isn't for beginners, despite the fact that it says introduction.
All right, and it's not too prescriptive, is it? Because otherwise, Natalie won't like it if it becomes a framework. So
it's best practices, not must do it.
Oh, I thought there weren't any best practices. Natalie, what you got? You guys, a nice prescriptive framework for us this week? Natalie's on mute. Natalie's pick is Conference Call in Real Life. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. She's back. Right. Okay. Woof, 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 woof.
No, the puppies are being close, very quiet tonight. So there's a feature mapping tool called at featuremap.com that is really neat. It's nice to, if you've got a kind of new product owner, nice to use to help them think through their story creation. And it's free, which is nice. And then the other thing was in response to some commentary that I got from Jason. It's a YouTube video. It's only 6 or 7 seconds long. But you will understand when I say, hey, Jason, monkey on the car.
Ha, 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 ha. And with that, friends, countrymen, lend me your ears. We're happy to share that, yes, the state of Agile is strong. And at that point, guess what? I think we'll go on record to say that maybe we'll think about doing our own This Agile Life survey in the future. Maybe we won't put a deadline on it, so we might eventually do that project. But at that point, thank you for listening. I know we ran long this time. Hopefully you've enjoyed the dialogue, so if you needed to take a time out, we appreciate that, and we hope you hung in there to the end. If you have any feedback, please connect with us at www.thisagilelife.com. On our website, you'll find some show notes with the links to the survey and other things we've talked about. And of course, you can also find contact information for the show and also for myself, Natalie, and Lee. So thanks for listening, and of course, keep living this Agile life.
This Agile Life is brought to you by a community of Agile developers and coaches aspiring to spread the word about this groundbreaking approach to software development.
Join us at
thisagilelife.com/community.